Hi everyone, Peter here from Movement and Performance, and in this presentation we're going to be talking about strength and conditioning for young athletes. So what's the most important thing for young athletes to actually achieve with strength and conditioning training, and how can we sort of develop these fundamental qualities so we can set these young athletes up for successful athletic careers in the future. So the first thing is we need to sort of define what we mean by young athletes. So we're talking about athletes of basically any sport. They may be playing multiple sports, and the age group we're talking is around 8 years old to when they just begin puberty, which is going to be, depending on the gender and the individual athlete, somewhere from 12 to 14 years old. Obviously, girls will reach this age slightly before males. And the question is, why do these young athletes need to do strength and conditioning training at all? So it's not really essential for them to do that. They can play multiple sports and get lots of benefits from that, and they should be playing multiple sports and enjoying what they're doing. But some sort of structured strength and conditioning training can actually be beneficial for these young athletes because it can help develop basically these very general qualities which can enhance their athletic ability in the future. So if we can help basically develop this fundamental base, we can then set them up to be more successful in the future. So if you want to learn more about sort of from childhood all the way to adulthood, about how we can best set athletes up for long-term athletic development, you can see the video Long-Term Athletic Development on this YouTube channel for more on that topic. But what we're going to be talking about is that age range that I just mentioned before, so 8 to puberty. So the goals of athletes at this age in terms of strength and conditioning, firstly, we need to understand that we don't really need or want a strict long-term structure to peak them for their season, because basically they are not developed enough to actually require this. So they're probably playing multiple sports. And the main thing we want to do is ensure that it's enjoyable for them. So whatever we do has to be fun for them so that they enjoy the process and it sets them up for success in the future. So what we're going to be working on in terms of physical capacities is, first and probably most important, general movement patterns, which we're going to get into what we mean by that in the next slides. General strength, so just getting some very general basic strength capacity and some very general aerobic capacity. And these qualities are going to be most important because, again, it's going to build that fundamental base that they require at a young age. So talking about general movement patterns, what we're talking about is things like these sort of speed and power exercises. And basically we're talking about the technique of that, so the movement of that. So we teach them how to run properly, how to get their knees up, how to actually use their arms, how to jump and land, and then how to sort of change direction by cutting and then throwing. So they're just basically being exposed to a whole bunch of very general movement patterns. And then in the future, if they can get these on point, then in the future when they actually need to do very specific strength and conditioning training, they can already have the movement qualities well established so that they reduce their risk of injury in the future and actually become more efficient. So in terms of, this is sort of the speed and power exercises. In terms of strength exercises, we're going to be talking about that in the next slide. So when we're talking about very general strength, we're talking about these sort of primary movement patterns. So squatting, hinging, pushing, pulling, and rotating. So squatting can be any sort of implement. So probably a goblet squat is a really good one because it gives them that counterbalance to actually be able to sit down into a squat. Hinging, so some sort of hip hinge. Pushing, things like push-ups, any sort of pressing overhead. Pulling, using their upper body to actually pull some maybe light loads, and then some sort of rotational capacity. So whether that's medicine ball rotational exercises or something of that nature. So what methods are going to be best to sort of work on these movements? Probably body weight exercise is going to be key. So they actually get some sort of body awareness and where they are in space, so some sort of proprioceptive qualities. And then additional loading can be used if it's required. So a goblet squat, we're not loading the athletes really heavily. We're just working on general strength, and some additional loading can actually be beneficial for them. It's not going to be dangerous. Things in sort of the 8 to 14 rep range, so pretty high repetitions, because we're just working on the movement patterns and getting some really general strength qualities. A great way to sort of put this all into like a training plan or like a training session is to use circuits. So we might have one exercise of each of these sort of general movements. We'll put into a circuit and they go around and do those exercises. So they're really exposed to a whole bunch of different movements and developing some very general strength. So aerobic conditioning, very general aerobic conditioning, nothing needs to be specific. So any sort of exercises, running, cycling, swimming, body weight training, like lightweight circuits, that sort of thing, can all be really beneficial for the athlete. And what methods we're going to use to actually employ these general aerobic conditioning exercises, little circuits that can help get their heart rate up, things like pushing a sled, doing some sort of body weight exercise and a bit of running can really be good methods to develop very general conditioning. Especially, it's important to expose them to lots of different movements. And then we can do interval type training, so we might do some exercises and we do them in intervals, or maybe have conditioning circuits where we do one exercise, rest for a certain amount of time, and then do another exercise in order to again develop some general aerobic capacity. And then another really good way is to have small games, which can make it really enjoyable for the athletes, but also they're going to be working pretty hard. So if we say maybe we can combine some of these, so we might have an interval training session where we do some sort of small soccer game for a minute, for maybe 2-on-2 or 3-on-3, so they're working really hard, and then they have a rest, and they might do the same thing, or they might play another game or something like that. So these are all potential methods, but really the coach needs to be very creative to make it enjoyable and fun for the athletes and still get them working nice and hard. That's it for this presentation, guys. Hopefully you got something out of it. You can follow Movement and Performance on Facebook and on Instagram. And if you haven't already, you can subscribe to Movement and Performance on YouTube on this channel, and then you'll be updated with the latest informative videos. So if you're watching this video, you're probably quite a curious individual that enjoys learning. So on Facebook and Instagram, you'll find these research infographics, which is essentially just going to be the latest scientific literature summarized into these easy to understand graphics, so that you can stay up to date with the latest research in sports performance training. You'll also find on Facebook and Instagram training footage of athletes, and then also some short informative videos covering a topic very briefly. Thanks for watching, guys. Hopefully you got something out of it, and make sure you stay tuned for the next video.